Before Walter White and before Dexter Morgan, the ultimate anti-hero was Tony Soprano. Tony is one of the greatest television characters in history, and it's easy to see why. The Sopranos aired from 1999 to 2007, and it left a huge impact on everyone who watched it and television in general. Today, I want to talk about what made it as good as it was, and why it won't ever be replicated in the same way ever again. There will be many spoilers in this, so if you want to avoid them, I would leave right now. So first, I'll explain the premise. I doubt anyone watching this doesn't know it, but it's a good starting point. Tony Soprano is the main character and lives with his wife Carmela, and his two children AJ and Meadow. He's a Catholic in name only and a businessman in waste management. He's also pretty high up in a mob family in New Jersey and a very dangerous man a lot of the time. He spends most of his nights at the Bing or with one of his gumas. Though Tony is the main character, he's not a good man. He cheats, he murders, he steals. Nothing is really off limits for him, and he loves the power he has. But I think Tony is one of the most interesting people, especially because this show shows us him in therapy, which I find very interesting.
When's the last time you had a prostate exam?
Hey, I don't even let anybody wag their finger in my face.
Tony has been getting panic attacks, so he decides that he should see a therapist. He ends up in the office of Dr. Melfi, who is a fantastic character herself. Throughout the show, we see her going back and forth if she should keep him as a client. She knows he's a bad man and is very aware of how dangerous he is. I think this is the first thing that really makes Sopranos stand out against the thousands of other shows out there. I think seeing him in therapy is very interesting, and seeing his breakthroughs and conversations with Dr. Melfi are incredibly interesting. Tony truly thinks he's a good man, and everything he does is justified. He believes this, and I love seeing Dr. Melfi talk to her therapist and her friends about how conflicted she is about him as a client. I think therapy was a very unique way to get an insight into a character like Tony. It makes it so interesting. He is often very honest and open in his sessions, and that helps us understand why and who he is.
Just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in.
Another thing that makes The Sopranos so interesting is their invitation to the viewers to the Mafia world. Throughout the show, we see mob hits, trucks being jacked, people being threatened, and even the FBI trying to take them down. It's such a fun and exaggerated look into the life of a gangster, and you see why they're also prideful, and honestly, they're violent a lot of the time. They're all so interesting and memorable. I'd like to take the time to talk about a few of them. I'll start with Sil, because there's not a lot to say about him. Silvio is great. I think he's definitely the most loyal to Tony, which makes sense since he's Tony's consigliere. Hard to say that word, sorry. Which means right-hand man. He takes care of business whenever Tony's not around, and he does this throughout the show as well. There really isn't much to his character beyond that. We didn't see a lot into his personal life, but he was one of my favorites. I really like Sil. Next, I'll talk about another boring character, but one I really liked, was Bobby. Bobby was a really stand-up guy during the show. From dealing with Junior to dealing with Janice, he's truly a saint. Bobby was known for being the only Mafia guy without a guma because he loved his wife so much. And I probably should have mentioned this. A guma is like their mistress in that world. And I don't know, I always thought it was very sweet that he didn't want one because he loved his wife so much. He was the only one. He also beat up Tony near the end of the series, and I thought that was pretty cool. Then I wanted to talk about Paulie. He's the opposite of the other two because he's not a boring character, but I also kind of hate him. He's such a hothead and a jerk. Throughout the show, he got so many people killed. He drove Christopher back to drinking. He was just really a dick. He always thought he should have been getting more respect, even though he never really did anything to deserve it. Paulie wanted respect so bad that he was going to even make a move on Tony at one point, which is crazy because he loves Tony so much he had a painting of Tony as a general above his fireplace. The last Mafia guy I want to talk about for now in the family was Pussy. Growing up with my dad watching Sopranos, I always thought it was so funny that there was a character called Pussy. Like, that was just his nickname, and I have no idea why he went for that. And though he was a short-lived character, he was incredibly important for the story. Pussy was friends with Tony's father and a very close friend of Tony as well. He was seemingly very loyal to the family, but it was revealed that that was all a lie. He was working as an FBI informant. He was one of the first, if not the first, of the family that we saw betray them. And this was such a shock to me. He seemed so loyal and was Tony's best friend. And when Tony found out, it absolutely destroyed him. They then took out Pussy, which is crazy. This is important because Tony felt guilty about it for years in the show. For years. He knew it had to be done, but he wished he didn't have to. Because of that, Pussy had a very lasting impact on the show, as funny as that sentence is.
So what, no fucking ZD now? Hey!
Another incredibly important aspect of the show was the family. Tony's family had huge impacts on everything he did and how he interacted with people around him. Some examples would be like Meadow not talking to him, Carmela leaving him, and AJ acting out at various times. All these different things caused scenarios from him being angry at work to literally full-on murders. So now I'm going to talk about a few of the family members. AJ is the first one I want to talk about, and he's mainly a bum in the show. He's a troublemaking rich kid that got away with anything he ever tried. He often fought with bouts of depression like Tony himself, and never really had any ambitions in life. Later in the show, he started to use the Soprano name to start being a troublemaker on a larger scale. I never liked AJ, and he especially irritated me whenever he would pretend to have a deep caring for other people's suffering, because it was always fake. Next, I want to talk about Meadow. Meadow, I think, is objectively the most morally good soprano. She has some of the same problems as AJ, being she's spoiled and pretends to care about a lot of causes because it's popular to do so. The difference is she's much more interesting than AJ, and she seems to be a good person and tries to do right by people. She even worked in a law clinic, volunteering her time to represent people who couldn't afford it. She always stood her ground against her dad whenever he said something racist or just wrong. I thought Meadow was the best of the children by a county mile. One thing that I really liked about The Sopranos compared to like Breaking Bad specifically is they didn't write Carmela to be hated. We're obviously rooting for Tony the whole time because he's the main character, but I very rarely rooted against Carmela. And in Breaking Bad, it felt like we were sometimes led to root against Skyler. Even when she left him, she had a good reason. She was always a character that represented being trapped by her situation, even though she'd have near romance with like other people like the priest and the painter and the goat Furio. Loved Furio, by the way. She never really went through with it. Even in a loveless marriage with a man who constantly cheated, she stayed strong. She really always just wanted what was best for their family. Next, I'll talk about Janice. Janice is one of Tony's sisters, and the only one of them that really matters in this story. She got better over time, but I found her to be insufferable most of the show. Other than his mom, this is the person in his life that irritated Tony the most by far. She was always fake, and her intentions would almost always just be to make money from a situation, even when she was completely undeserving of it. She did get better over time in the show, and by the time she was with Bobby, married Bobby, she was much better. And then there's Junior. Junior Soprano is Tony's uncle. He was always a grouchy asshole, in my opinion. He felt very overshadowed by his brother and then eventually Tony. He was a terrible boss and the second biggest troublemaker of all the Sopranos. He thought he should be the boss, but no one else really thought that, and it was clear that it should be Tony. And that hurt his fragile ego so bad. Because of this, a bunch of people had to die, and it was needless. I hated Junior for that. I did start to feel bad for him at the end when his mind started to go, and he just kind of faded away in a hospital. So he sucked as a character, but in a really well done way, we were supposed to hate him. Last, and my least favorite member of the Sopranos family, is Tony's mother, Livia. I hated her so much throughout the show. All she did was bitch and get people killed by manipulating others. She actively got Junior to try to kill Tony. She was awful, and verbally abusive, and racist the entire time she was in the show. She was the biggest reason that Tony even went to therapy. We got to see flashbacks of him as a kid and her threatening him with a knife. We also got to see her make her husband stay in the Mafia life when he was given an opportunity to leave for a new job. She was quite literally one of my least favorite characters in the entire show, easily.
Tony! You see, Tuesday, I can take my kid to hear Raffy.
I'd also like to talk about Tony's love life. Throughout the show, Tony had many different women that he dated, and it always worked out so poorly for him. You could say it was bad karma for him cheating on Carmela so many times. There are three main women that he slept with: Irina, Valentina, and Gloria. They all ended poorly in their own ways, but I'd like to talk about them all. Irina was the first of the mistresses that we saw Tony have. She was the first to show us what kind of man Tony really was, and the worst thing that could have happened did happen. She fell in love with Tony, and he rejected her, tried to get her out of there, and she eventually attempted to unalive herself because he broke things off. Next, I'll talk about Valentina. Tony met Valentina when she was dating someone else who worked for him, Ralph. I'm not going to talk about Ralph in this video, but I hated him. He was one of my bottom two favorite, least hated that guy, let's just say that. She was a big reason that Tony and Carmela fought and separated too. The longer Tony was with her, the more he missed Carmela. They break up after Valentina burns herself while cooking breakfast for him. It was kind of rough, but he did pay for the hospital bills, I guess. Lastly, I will talk about Gloria. Definitely the most tragic of these three stories. They meet because they're both patients for Dr. Melfi. Dr. Melfi warns Tony not to get involved, but there's an immediate attraction between the two. Tony starts to notice she was a bit unhinged, and he eventually broke it off with her. We later find out that she successfully ended her own life because of this.
Because you don't gotta love me, but you will respect me.
Lastly, I want to talk about the two most interesting characters in the show. I've mentioned Tony, obviously, but there's one other specific one that's not Tony that I would really like to talk about. I truly think Christopher is the best and most interesting character in the entire series. We get to see him go from doing shit jobs and getting no respect to becoming a made man. We got to see him go from becoming an addict to getting clean to dying because of it all. We get to see him go from being a loving boyfriend to Adriana to having her killed for working with the FBI. Christopher is an incredibly interesting and nuanced character. We even find out that at one point he was getting groomed into becoming the next big boss of the family. He truly had it all at different points of the show, and each time he ruined it one way or another. Christopher even has a multiple outs during the show because it's just so sad because he never took them. He kept coming back to the family no matter what and how much it hurt him. He even became a successful movie producer by the end, and he just stayed in the family. He was such an interesting character, and in my opinion was he's not the main character, but he's just as much of a main character as Tony. Speaking of Tony, I haven't talked much about him. He's so interesting to me. I love that we got his character so flushed out during sessions with Dr. Melfi. He truly thinks he's a good man. We see him cheat and steal and hurt and murder throughout the show, and he still thinks he's a good man. That's a big difference between him and Walter White. Walter never thinks he's a good person at the end of the day for what he's doing, but Tony does. It's so interesting that he was able to delude himself into thinking he was a good man. He would do absolutely anything for his family, and is greedy as can be. If we look at it from an outside lens, it's easy to see he's truly an evil character. But he's an incredibly fun character to watch too. He's funny, charismatic, insecure, smart, and truly so entertaining. It is such a shame that Gandolfini died a few years after The Sopranos ended. He was such an amazing actor and had an amazing career ahead of him, and unfortunately for us, we never got to see that. So there are many different things that made The Sopranos stand out as one of the greatest shows of all time. The characters were incredibly written and all worked together to make an unbelievable story. The family dynamic and the mafia dynamic kept the show from just being another crime show or sitcom. Therapy being involved helps us know Tony and know what he was thinking the whole time, and I thought that was so interesting in so many ways. And lastly, one of the best written protagonists in the show ever written. Like, Tony is amazing. I absolutely love this show. And if for any reason you got this far and you haven't seen the show, I think you should definitely give it a try. But thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. I've watched a lot of shows, so if you guys like this and this does well, I could do so many of these. But either way, subscribe for more because that helps my channel grow. And have a great week. Bye.